A devoted nurse saves a homeless old man, but as he whispers his final words, she is left shaken. You have her eyes. A week later, she receives a mysterious invitation. What fate awaits her? In the emergency ward of St. Mercy Hospital, cold white fluorescent lights cast a stark glow over the long hallways, reflecting off the polished tile floor. The steady beeping of heart monitors filled the air, mingling with the sharp scent of antiseptics. Sophia Carter, a young nurse with neatly tied brown hair, moved swiftly between patients. More than 10 hours had passed since her shift began, yet she hadn't had a moment's rest. From her very first day at St. Mercy, she had learned one thing. In the ER, there was no time for hesitation. A split-second decision could save a life, or end one. The door swung open. 2 paramedics rushed in, pushing a stretcher. Lying on it was an elderly homeless man, gaunt, frail, his silver hair tangled, his face lined with deep wrinkles. His skin was pale, his breathing shallow, his chest rising and falling with visible struggle. Male, about 70. Acute heart failure. No ID, one of the paramedics reported before hurrying off. Sophia quickly checked his vitals. His pulse was weak, blood pressure dangerously low. He needed immediate treatment. Dr. Henderson, a middle-aged physician with a perpetually disapproving expression, glanced over and shook his head. A homeless man? Move him to the waiting area. We've got more important cases to handle. Sophia's grip tightened around the clipboard in her hands, her heart pounding. She had seen this happen too many times. Patients without insurance, without family, pushed aside simply because they couldn't pay. He might not survive if we make him wait, she said, her voice firm. Henderson shrugged, indifferent. Sophia, this is a hospital, not a charity. Do your job. Her jaw clenched. If she did nothing, this man might not make it through the night. She leaned down, placing a reassuring hand on his frail arm. But in that instant, his cloudy eyes fluttered open. His fingers wrapped around hers, weak yet strangely firm. You have her eyes? His voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. Sophia blinked, caught off guard, but before she could react, his grip loosened. His head slumped to the side. Unconscious. His words echoed in her mind, but there was no time to dwell on them. I need epinephrine now, she shouted, snapping into action. The emergency room remained bathed in the cold glow of fluorescent lights. The sharp scent of antiseptics lingered in the air, mixing with the metallic clatter of medical instruments. Outside, the city lay shrouded in darkness, but inside, St. Mercy Hospital, the battle for life raged on without pause. Sophia wiped the sweat from her forehead, her full attention on the unconscious homeless man lying on the hospital bed. His heartbeat had stabilized after the epinephrine injection, but it was still dangerously weak. She glanced at the monitor displaying his vitals, silently praying he would make it through the night. Across the room, Dr. Henderson stood with his arms crossed, his expression tight with disapproval. He was one of St. Mercy's most experienced doctors, but also one of its most pragmatic. To him, patients were numbers, and those numbers needed to make financial sense. Sophia, this hospital isn't a charity. His voice was clipped, each word measured, as if speaking to a naive child. Save your energy for the patients who can actually pay. She turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. He's a human being. He needs help. Henderson sighed, shaking his head. Do you really think he's going to pay his bills? Be realistic, Sophia. There are dozens of patients out there waiting, patients with insurance, patients with families who actually care about them. You can save one homeless man, but at what cost? Someone else might lose their chance to live. A slow, simmering anger burned in Sophia's chest. She understood the brutal logic of the system, but that didn't mean she had to accept it. Her fists clenched at her sides, her voice firm. We don't get to decide who deserves to live. A heavy silence settled over the room. The other nurses exchanged furtive glances, some scoffing, some merely shaking their heads, as if Sophia had just said something hopelessly idealistic. Henderson raised an eyebrow, studying her like she was a fool. You're not a doctor, Sophia, you don't understand. I may not be a doctor, she shot back without hesitation, but I'm a human being, and if we forget that, We've lost everything." Henderson let out a dry, humorless laugh, folding his arms across his chest. "Do whatever you want. Just don't expect me to cover for you when this blows up in your face." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Sophia standing amidst the wary, judgmental stares of her colleagues. A young nurse, no older than 25, whispered to the person beside her, "Who does she think she is? Some kind of guardian angel?" Another nurse smirked, voice dripping with sarcasm. "What's kindness worth when you're out of a job? Let's see how long she lasts." Sophia heard every word, but she didn't care. She turned back to the old man, checking his vitals again. Under the dim hospital lights, his eyelids fluttered. Slowly, he began to wake. Sophia leaned in gently. "Can you hear me? Are you in any pain?" The old man blinked, his clouded eyes reflecting the weight of time. A pause stretched between them before he finally spoke, his voice hoarse but steady. "You're the first person now to look at me like I'm human." Sophia's chest tightened. "Of course you're human." She took his frail hand in hers. "And I won't leave you alone." Something flickered in his eyes, an odd mix of understanding, sorrow and something else, something like waiting. "Thank you," he whispered. She didn't know why, but the words felt heavier than they seemed. Sophia gave his hand a reassuring squeeze, a silent promise. Outside, the night stretched on, but a storm was coming, and she knew this was only the beginning. The cold fluorescent lights bore down on the emergency room, where Sophia stood frozen, eyes locked on the heart monitor. The old homeless man's EKG flickered weakly, each beat slow and unsteady. It was a countdown, and she knew that if he didn't get surgery immediately, he wouldn't make it. She looked up, her worried gaze meeting Dr. Henderson's. "He needs surgery now. He can't wait any longer." Henderson remained unmoved, arms crossed over his chest, his face devoid of emotion. "You're starting this again, Sophia. I thought we already had this conversation." Sophia took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm despite the storm raging inside her. "This isn't about policies. This is about a human life," Henderson scoffed, smirking. "How naive." His tone dripped with condescension. "This hospital doesn't have enough beds for uninsured vagrants. We can't save everyone." "But we can save him," she shot back, her voice fierce, her eyes blazing with determination. Henderson let out a slow, dismissive sigh and turned to the head nurse. "Move him to palliative care. Keep him comfortable, no surgery." Two nurses moved to wheel the man's bed away. "Stop!" Sophia nearly shouted. Every head in the emergency room turned toward her. "You don't give orders here, Sophia," Henderson said coolly, eyeing her as if she were a fool. Then, after a pause, his lips curled into a mocking smile. "Unless—" He tilted his head slightly. "You're offering to sign a personal financial guarantee?" The entire room went still. Whispers broke out. "A personal guarantee," one nurse murmured. "Is she insane? She's going to ruin her career." Henderson folded his arms, waiting, his gaze taunting. Sophia felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her own heartbeat pounded in her ears. If she signed, she'd be responsible for every cent of the surgery's cost. A staggering amount. More than her savings, more than she could possibly afford. Would she lose her job? Maybe would she drown in debt? Absolutely. She might destroy her entire career over a man she had never met before tonight. Henderson arched a brow. "So, Sophia, are you really willing to throw everything away for someone who will probably end up back on the streets tomorrow?" Part of her wanted to back down. But then she turned to the old man. He was watching her. His eyes were no longer clouded. There was something deep in them, something expectant, a silent plea. A trust that felt heavier than words. "You're the first person to look at me like I'm human." She swallowed hard. If she didn't help him, no one would. Henderson sighed, shaking his head. "I figured no one would be stupid enough for this." "Bring me the forms." The room fell into absolute silence. Henderson blinked, then let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "You're serious?" "Completely." He shrugged and tossed the papers onto the nearest table. "Then go ahead, ruin yourself." Sophia picked up the pen. Her hand trembled. For a split second, she hesitated. Time seemed to slow. This was the moment. She could set the pen down and let the system work the way it always had. Or she could step over the line drawn in front of her, no matter what it cost her. She lifted her head, locking eyes with Henderson. Not everyone is as heartless as you. And then she signed. The ink dried on the page, sealing her fate. There was no turning back now. The air in the room thickened. Some nurses stared at her like she'd just thrown herself off a cliff. Others exchanged hushed murmurs. One of them snorted. She's an idiot. If anything goes wrong, she's finished. Sophia didn't look back. Prep the OR. The old man stared at her, and a single tear slipped down his wrinkled cheek. Thank you, child. Sophia squeezed his frail hand. You're going to be okay. Outside, the storm was rolling in, and deep down she knew this was only the beginning. The operating room doors swung open. Cold white light spilled over the gaunt face of the old man, now lying in recovery. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the air. His heartbeat was stronger. He was still weak, but he had survived. Outside, Sophia stood motionless, her breath still unsteady after the grueling hours in surgery. Through the glass window, she watched his chest rise and fall, the proof that he was still alive. A quiet sense of relief settled in her chest. She had won this battle. But 10 minutes later, the next one began. Sophia Carter. Conference room. Now, the ice-cold voice of Helen Monroe, the hospital director, rang out from behind her. Sophia froze. Her stomach dropped. The conference room door shut behind her with a soft but final click. The space was vast, yet suffocating. At the long wooden table sat the hospital's senior executives, their expressions unreadable. At the head of the table, Helen Monroe, powerful, ruthless, regarded her with piercing, dispassionate eyes. Who do you think you are? Making decisions like that? Her voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp as a scalpel. Sophia clenched her fists, willing herself to stay calm. I did the right thing. If I hadn't stepped in, that patient would be dead. Monroe let out a humorless laugh, void of warmth. And you think that's what matters most? Her tone was almost mocking. You didn't just break protocol, you overstepped your authority. If that patient had died on the table, this hospital could be facing a lawsuit. The words hit Sophia like a slap. But he didn't die. He's alive. Isn't that worth more than any policy? A long silence followed. Monroe leaned forward slightly, her gaze like cold steel. You really believe medicine is just about saving lives, don't you? The world doesn't work that way, Nurse Carter. The room felt smaller, pressing in on her. You are receiving an official warning. If you continue to let your emotions dictate your actions, you will be suspended immediately. The finality. In her tone shattered something inside Sophia. She couldn't afford to lose this job, but she had already lost faith in this place. I understand. Monroe nodded, satisfied. Good, you're dismissed. Sophia walked out, her legs heavy, drained of strength. She had saved a life, and for that she was being condemned. She didn't know how she ended up in the locker room. Didn't know how. She ended up sitting in front of the old cracked mirror. Outside, the whispers continued. Told you she wouldn't last long. Naive. Risking her career over some homeless old man. Sophia clenched her fists. But she didn't fight back. She stared into the mirror. The reflection staring back wasn't that of a resolute nurse. It was just a young woman with tired eyes and too many doubts. Am I doing the right thing? The question echoed in her mind. No. Answer came. Outside, the night stretched on. But for Sophia, this was the loneliest moment of her life. 7 days had passed since that night. 7 days since Sophia had walked out of that conference room, her chest tight with uncertainty. 7 days since she had received an official warning, since she had stared into the mirror and asked herself a question with no answer. Did I do the right thing? St. Mercy Hospital ran as usual. Patients came and went. Emergency cases flooded in and doctors worked tirelessly. But something had changed. Sophia was no longer herself. She still worked, she still cared for her patients, but everything felt mechanical now, like a machine running on autopilot. She no longer smiled at her colleagues. She no longer argued with Henderson. The fire that once burned inside her had dulled into embers. She avoided mirrors. She avoided thinking about the old homeless man. She avoided the whispers behind her back. But just when she thought she could keep going like this, fate knocked on her door once more. That evening, as she returned to her small apartment, she noticed an envelope lying on the floor just outside her door. Black, unmarked, no stamp, no return address, just her name, embossed in gold lettering, Sophia Carter. A cold breeze slipped through the doorway, sending a shiver down her spine. Who would send something like this? She picked it up, running her fingers over the smooth paper. When she opened it, a single, elegant invitation slid out. Black card. Gold. Trim. The lettering was engraved with meticulous precision. Thank you for believing in kindness. A special gathering will be held on Saturday at 8 p.m. at Harrington Manor. Her heartbeat slowed for a second. Harrington Manor. The Harringtons, one of the wealthiest, most powerful families in finance. Their gatherings were the pinnacle of high society, attended by business magnates, politicians, and the elite. But why? Was she invited? Was this a joke? Sophia turned the card over, but there was nothing else, no signature, no phone number. She clenched the invitation in her hands, torn between unease and curiosity. She could ignore it. Toss it in the trash and go on with her life. Or she could go. Find out who had sent it. Her gaze lingered on the words, "Thank you for believing in kindness." A memory surfaced, clouded eyes, a frail hand gripping hers, a whispered voice before. Slipping into unconsciousness, she took a slow, steady breath. All right, let's see what this is about. Saturday night, Sophia stood before the gates of Harrington Manor, a grand estate perched atop a hill on the outskirts of the city. White marble columns gleamed under the golden lights, and luxury cars lined up. At the entrance, their polished exteriors reflecting the glow of the chandeliers inside, she wore a navy blue evening gown, borrowed from a friend, since she owned nothing remotely suitable for an event like this. All around her, guests stepped out of their vehicles, their tailored suits and glittering gowns exuding wealth and power. Laughter and hushed conversations filled the air. She took a deep breath and stepped toward the entrance. An older butler stood at the door, bowing slightly as she handed him the invitation. He examined it briefly, then smiled. "Miss Carter, welcome. The host is expecting you." Her pulse skipped. The host, she wanted to ask. But before she could, the doors swung open, revealing an entirely different world inside. A massive crystal chandelier hung high above, casting golden light over polished marble floors. A soft symphony played in the background, weaving through the hum of conversation among the city's most influential figures. Silver trays carried glistening champagne flutes, and eyes flickered toward her, some with curiosity, some with quiet amusement. Sophia felt an odd sense of displacement. She didn't belong here, so why was she here? "Miss Carter." A voice, deep and smooth, spoke from behind her. She turned and froze. Standing before her was a man in a perfectly tailored black suit, silver hair neatly combed back. But it was his eyes, those eyes that stole the breath from her lungs, the same eyes as the old homeless man from the ER that night. But now he was no vagrant. He held himself with quiet authority, his presence commanding, effortless. A slow, knowing smile tugged at his lips. "We meet again." Sophia's mind reeled. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. How could a homeless man from the streets now stand before her, surrounded by the wealthiest people in the city? 1,000 questions raced through her mind, but only one thought echoed loud and clear. "I've just stepped into something far bigger than I ever imagined." The air of the grand party was lavish yet cold, a world entirely removed from the reality Sophia had always known. Guests draped in opulence glided past her, their hushed laughter laced with meaning, their watchful gazes sharp beneath a veil of polite curiosity. Sophia stood frozen, her heartbeat faltering as her eyes locked onto the man before her, the homeless man. But he was no longer a homeless man. He wore a perfectly tailored black suit, every line of his aged face now exuding intelligence, power, an aura she had never seen in him before. Gone were the tattered clothes, the slouched posture weighed down by exhaustion. The man before her was not someone society had cast aside. He was someone important, someone powerful. She swallowed hard, trying to form a question, but her throat tightened. He still held that same enigmatic smile, his gaze filled with quiet understanding. "You still recognize me, don't you, kind nurse?" Sophia's entire world tilted on its axis. Her breath caught. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man she had risked everything to save, the man the hospital had disregarded, the man Henderson had called worthless, now stood before her as one of the most significant figures in the room. "How? How is this possible?" she stammered, her mind spinning. He chuckled, soft but weighted with something deeper. "I owe you a thank you, Sophia." "For what?" He took a step closer, his gaze never leaving hers. "For helping me when you didn't know who I was." Sophia felt the room spinning around her. Pieces of the puzzle started falling into place, memories rewinding like a film playing in reverse. She remembered the way he had looked at her that night in the ER, not with fear, not with desperation, but with quiet, measured observance. As if he already knew something she didn't. She remembered his whispered words, "You have her eyes." She remembered the way he had gripped her hand, weak but deliberate, as if there was more meaning in that touch than she had understood at the time. And now, standing before him in this moment, she realized something she had never considered before. You were never homeless, were you?" A heavy silence stretched between them. He inclined his head slowly. "My name is William Harrington." The name struck her like a thunderclap. William Harrington, one of the most elusive billionaires in the world, a man almost invisible to the public, yet a titan in finance, the force behind countless charitable foundations, yet no one truly knew who he was. Why? Why had a billionaire been on the streets? Why had he let himself be mistaken for a nobody? She couldn't make sense of it. Sophia shook her head as if trying to dispel an impossible dream. No, this doesn't make any sense. Why? Why were you in that hospital? Why were you in that condition?" William held his smile, but this time there was a shadow of something deeper behind it, something almost sad. "That is a long story, my dear." She wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but William lifted a hand, gesturing for patience. "I don't want you to worry about that right now. I just need you to know one thing." He looked straight into her eyes, the eyes of a man who had seen far more than he would ever say. "You did something that very few people have the courage to do. You saved me when no one else would. You believed in kindness when the world had forgotten it exists." Sophia felt her pulse hammering in her chest. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to react. She only knew that she was standing on the precipice of something far bigger than she had ever imagined. William's eyes glinted with something unreadable as the corner of his lips lifted slightly. "Now it's my turn to help you." Sophia blinked, dazed. "Help me?" William nodded. "You risked everything to save me without asking for anything in return. Now I want to see what you'll do if given a chance to change everything." Her fingers curled into her palms, damp with sweat. Was this a trap, or was this a gift? "I'm giving you a choice, Sophia." William tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Are you ready to step into a world you never thought possible?" Sophia took a deep breath. She knew in this moment, whatever she chose now would change her life forever. Sophia's heart pounded as William Harrington raised his wineglass, the soft clink against his gold ring echoing through the vast hall. The room fell silent. Hundreds of powerful guests, people who controlled unimaginable wealth, politicians who could alter the course of nations, had turned their eyes to her. She could feel the weight of their stares. They were assessing her, wondering who she was, wondering why she was here. And then William spoke, his deep voice cutting through the hush like a blade. "Tonight I want to take a moment to honor someone extraordinary." A few guests exchanged puzzled glances. No one knew who he was referring to. Sophia's breath felt heavy in her chest. William continued, his gaze locked onto hers. "I once believed this world had no place for kindness. I once believed that if a person lost everything, family, wealth, dignity, then they lost their worth as well." Sophia swallowed hard, a shiver crawling down her spine. He was talking about himself. "I tested life by losing it all, just to see if there was still anyone who would look at me and see a human being. A few murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some were beginning to piece it together. William smiled faintly. And then I found my answer. I met someone who never asked who I was, never questioned what I had to offer in return. She saved me. Not for recognition, not for money, but because she believed it was the right thing to do. Sophia felt, the room spinning. Her name is Sophia Carter. The silence was deafening. Some gasped, others murmured among themselves, as if they couldn't believe what they had just heard. And then a voice cut through the stillness like a dagger. She's just a nurse? Sophia flinched, turning toward the source. A middle-aged man in a grey suit, his expression doubtful, his tone dripping with disbelief. You're telling us a no-name nurse saved you, and you think that warrants this kind of recognition? Sophia stiffened. William's smile didn't waver, but his gaze sharpened. I don't think she deserves it, I know she does. The murmurs ceased. With a slight nod, William signaled to his assistant. A wooden box was carried forward and placed before him. He lifted the lid. Inside, 3 gold-plated cards gleamed under the chandelier's light. William turned back to Sophia, holding her gaze before speaking. Sophia, you risked everything to save me. Tonight I give you the chance to choose your own fate. He placed the cards before her, his voice deliberate, measured. You have 3 choices. First, you can take an immense sum of money, enough for you to live comfortably for the rest of your life. But if you choose it, you must leave. Medicine forever. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Sophia's eyes widened. Second, you can receive a full scholarship to any medical school of your choice, finally becoming the doctor you've always wanted to be. But in return, you must leave this city. You must leave St. Mercy, and you can never come back. Sophia's pulse raced. And lastly, William paused, his gaze steady. You can take ownership of a charitable hospital, one that bears your name. A place where you can fight for those who have no one else. But understand this, if you choose it, you will be going up against an entire system. You will have to fight, and you will never be able to turn back. The world seemed to shrink around her. Every eye in the room was on her. She could take the easy way out, or she could fight. Her breath quickened. What should I do? Am I ready for this? William didn't push her. He simply waited. Sophia took a deep, steadying breath. She reached out and picked up a card. The room held its breath. She had chosen the hardest path. Applause rang through the lavish ballroom, but Sophia barely heard it. The moment her fingers touched the golden card, she knew her life would never be the same again. She hadn't chosen wealth. She hadn't chosen the easy road to becoming a doctor. Instead, she had chosen to fight, to stand for those the world had forgotten, the ones like William Harrington that night. William watched her, a quiet pride glimmering in his eyes. You just changed your life. Sophia. She tightened her grip on the card, inhaling deeply. I know. Months later, the scent of antiseptic still lingered in the air, but this time it no longer felt isolating. St. Mercy was no longer just a place where she worked. It had become a battlefield for change. And more than anything, she was no longer alone. The Carter Foundation Hospital, funded by William Harrington, was now open. It wasn't grand. It wasn't polished like the city's elite medical institutions. But for those who had nowhere else to go, it was a miracle, and Sophia stood at the very heart of it. Day after day, she took in patients who would have been turned away elsewhere. She saw eyes that once held only despair, now flicker with hope. She held trembling hands that for the first time in a long time clung to something, trust. She knew she had made the right choice. A late night at the hospital, the ER doors swung open. A paramedic rushed in, pushing a stretcher. A frail man lay upon it, his clothes tattered, his body trembling from fever. Sophia looked up from her desk. Homeless. No ID. No insurance. At other hospitals, those words would have been a death sentence. Here they meant nothing. Sophia rose to her feet and approached the stretcher. She reached for the man's skeletal hand, pressing her fingers gently against his clammy skin, feeling the warmth that still remained. His eyes fluttered open, filled with confusion. Sophia smiled, steady, reassuring. Don't worry, she whispered. I've got you. And in that moment, a circle was closed, and another had just begun. Beyond the window, the city lights still burned, but now they no longer felt cold. On the screen, a single line of text appeared. No act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Sophia's journey has shown us that even the smallest act of kindness has the power to change a life. Sometimes, all it takes is one right decision, one unwavering belief, to make a difference in a world that often feels too cold. If you believe that kindness still exists, if you believe that everyone deserves a chance, like, share, and subscribe today. Drop a comment below. If it were you, which path would you choose? Let's spread the power of compassion together, because no act of kindness is ever wasted.